Welcome to 365 Brothers. I'm your host, Robin Shine. This podcast introduces you to Black men from across the United States, their wisdom, their experiences, their joys. It also shares some of the triumphs after diversity. Basically, this podcast is about the humanity of Black men, just as it could be about the humanity of women, of white, of brown, of yellow. I focus on Black men in this podcast because of the statistics, the facts that Black men are more likely to be stopped by the police without a justifiable cause. Now, if you're questioning that, this podcast is the place for you to be. I ask each man the same 11 questions, and one of them asks about their interactions with law enforcement. The point of that question is to show the commonality in who is stopped, regardless of profession, regardless of age. The other thing is to just share the diversity of experiences of Black men outside of what you see on TV, in movies, outside of the stereotypes and the tropes. Now, if you're wondering, it is a subtle process. So don't just listen to one episode. I recommend listen to 5. When you listen to at least 5, you get it. You will truly get it. And after that, you'll either be hooked or not. But this is a 5-episode minimum, so get ready, get comfy. This is 365 Brothers. Welcome. Today, we are speaking with a creative media consultant and producer. He's worked in the media industry for over 30 years. He's a recipient of grants to help educate both at the high school level in Compton Unified, as well as a new partnership with Los Angeles Community College. We are speaking with Mr. Eric Elder. Welcome, Eric. I'm so glad to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you, Robin, for inviting me.
Absolutely. I met Eric in one of many courses that I've taken for personal growth and development. We were just chatting a little bit before we came on, and I just love how you have created work that works for you. It's something we all strive for. And, I find that more and more in the 21st century, there are opportunities to do that, but it is still an accomplishment when it actually happens and you are living that. And I hope you'll share a little bit about that. What would you like to share with the listeners before we get into the questions?
So yes, I've been in the media industry for 30 plus years, and on the production side as well as the educational side. My focus and specialty has been in animation, video games, and for the last several years, XR, which is virtual reality and augmented reality. And I also love to share that I love games. It's one of my big passions in life, particularly board games. And I like the kind of very complex Euro style of game. Some of my favorite are the Gallerist, On Mars, Orin Labora, Madeira. There's always new games coming out. I just learned a couple new games this week.
Wow.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a fascinating hobby, and I definitely probably the thing I enjoy most. I mean, I love all kinds of games. I love pinball, not video games as much, surprisingly enough, but definitely appreciate.
That is interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just a real passion of mine. I enjoy designing games as well, supporting the design and development of games, coaching young people on game design, teaching game design.
I'm wondering, Do you have a recollection of when you first fell in love with gaming, board gaming?
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember very vividly the moment. I mean, well, I can say this. I was very fortunate as a young person that I had, especially growing up in North Philly in a pretty, you know, pretty poor neighborhood. My parents just, did everything that they could to make sure that I had, everything, all, like not just the necessities, but things that I wanted as well. And one of the things that my dad in particular made sure I had was a bunch of board games. I remember now, like looking up in my closet. So I actually had a playroom when I was younger. So I literally had a bedroom that was literally full of toys.
Whoa.
And in the closet of that room at the top was board games. And it was about, I don't know, 10, 15 board games.
Huh.
So I had a love for board games since I could remember. But there was a particular moment. Um, there was a board game version of Dungeons and Dragons called Dungeon by the same company, TSR. And I remember that game coming out, and I remember getting it from department store and learning the rules. And then, I mean, I must have been around somewhere between 11 and 13, like around about that age, I guess, maybe a little younger. I can't quite remember. Uh,
Hmm.
but I remember reading the rules and getting like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 of my neighborhood friends, often stay at my grandparents' house. So I was staying with her. And there was just something really magical about some cardboard and some dice and these little cards that transported us to this dungeon where we were fighting, zombies and dragons and, hurling fireballs and lightning bolts, all happening in our imagination.
Yeah.
And I thought that there was something very powerful and magical about language and about a rule set that was able to create this experience. And I can't say like at that moment I committed my life to it, but it definitely had a huge impact. And I, to this very day, I love teaching new games to people. I love facilitating all types of gameplay and, playing games myself and just having other people enjoy games. And like I said, making games, being, also having a very strong art background, that creativity kind of wove together, to ultimately, being able to design and produce games now.
When you shared the experience that stood out for you as a child, I felt like I was right there. And what stood out for me was that here you had these inanimate objects, the cardboard, the dice, the cards, and that they created a shared reality, a shared world that could encompass you and your friends, that could hold you all in the same place. And it wasn't an actual place. Like, I'm just stuck with that, especially because now your work in XR,
Mm.
it's like this, the ability to create a shared world and share experiences seems to be, or at least for me, that's what I hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that's definitely a huge part of it. I actually a large part of my educational career has been actually as an academic director and creating curriculum and programs and running programs. Although I started my educational career very like pretty much right out of college as an instructor.
Hmm.
But the class that actually got me back in front of the classroom was a few years ago at Loyola Marymount College. I have some friends, associates there. Well, actually, one ran the animation program and one ran the film program. And they actually invited me to invent a new class on world building, with the popularity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Potter and all of these huge franchises, they thought it would be valuable for young film and animation students to actually get a critical analysis and study of how you create one of these, worlds. And that's been, the name of my company that I founded years ago is called OW Entertainment, or Online Worlds Entertainment. And so things always been very important to me, and kind of part of, this whole passion and love of art and games, and like you said, realities, and being able to create, immersive worlds for others to participate in and enjoy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's dive in. So,
Sure.
Eric, what is your favorite song, either now or all time, and why?
So my favorite song, and again, I can't help but feel like this is kind of cheesy, but it's "Believe in Yourself" from the Wiz soundtrack by Lena Horne.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember listening to the Wiz soundtrack when I was a kid, just on repeat, just constant.
Mm-hmm.
So inspirational. Yeah, it's just such a powerful message and song.
Yeah, it's funny. I literally can see her and the sparkles and the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the little babies floating around on the wires.
Exactly. I can see it right now. I played it quite a bit myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, if you ever need a pick-me-up, throw that track on.
And my listeners know I will have a link to it in the show notes. So
Nice.
What is a favorite childhood memory and why?
Well, definitely the one I shared about playing Dungeon. Yeah, I think that's the one that most.
Okay. Yeah, I wondered as we were talking about it and we went there, I was like, I bet that's his favorite.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Let's talk about accomplishments. And I asked
Sure.
this question in two parts. What is an accomplishment that means the most to you personally?
Mm-hmm.
And then what is an accomplishment that you find others are most impressed by, or it's the one that they go, really, or whoa. So let's start with the one that means the most to you.
The one that means the most to me is definitely my Game Wizards program that I started. So I started one of the first bachelor's degree programs in video game production 20 years ago now, back in 2000. I think the main reason for how successful the program was the special class that I designed, which was the Game Wizards class. And Game Wizards, the intention of the class was to give students as close to a real world AAA game studio experience as they possibly could have and still be in the classroom.
Which aspect of being able to do that is the one that has you the most satisfied about being able to do that?
I mean, it's hard to pinpoint a thing. It's really like just all of it, just the intention of it, that it was successful. So like and it's like, again, how do you measure success for a program like this? And the school that I built the program for, the Art Institute, located in Santa Monica, the Art Institutes were really focused on, job placement. So it was arts-based education, but it was really, that was the real intention. It wasn't like a regular university where that might not necessarily be the case, especially if you go to a more liberal arts, or you get a more liberal arts type of degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of placement, we had a 90 to 100% placement. So out of 18 quarters that I was the director, 11 of those, we had 100% placement in the industry.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. So it was that's definitely one, in terms of a game, right? Playing a game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the number one metric, but also I'm very satisfied and proud of that I set a strategy, like a very particular strategy, and that the strategy worked, and that it's still working to today. Like not at the time when we started, but at like I guess it was around 2007 or 2008 when, you know, platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn started to gain prominence. And so it was right at that point where I could actually be Facebook friends and connected on LinkedIn with most of my graduates. And it's just very satisfying 20 years later to see that a lot of them are, you know, leads in the industry working on the biggest games, you know, Call of Duty, God of War, the Blizzard games, World of Warcraft.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. That I can hear the satisfaction and why it would be so. Just having your contribution be realized in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what about the accomplishment that seems to impress others where they go, oh.
Yeah, that one is actually, so I moved out from Philadelphia to Los Angeles in 97. And my first studio job in animation was actually animation on the Beavis and Butthead feature. But my first job in California was at a company called Film Roman that produced The Simpsons and a lot of other hit shows, Garfield. But they also produced King of the Hill, and that was the job that I landed in California when I moved out. And that's the one people, you know, King of the Hill, that they like, oh wow, King, I love that.
Yeah, I know. I just did it. you know what's funny is I ask that question all the time, right? And then people say what it is, and then it's like I'm not even trying to, but then I go, oh wow, and it's like, okay, yeah, they hit it.
That's the one.
I love King of the Hill. That was, you know, that was a different kind of show for that day, a different kind of cartoon. I mean, yes, we'd already had The Simpsons, but that was like, it was just yeah, it stands out for me as something new, and that's pretty cool. And Garfield also. So yeah, kudos. That's quite a resume, as they say.
Thank you. Yeah, and actually won an Emmy for one of the episodes that I worked on. They call it Bobby Love, so that was exciting.
Oh, now you tell me. I could have introduced you as Emmy winning. That's all good. They better listen all the way through.
Yeah. But actually, my favorite episode was one of the last ones that I worked on, which I forget the name of the episode, but it was the one where Bobby turns 13 and Peggy wants to do something special for his birthday. So she goes to, I guess, hip hop school and learns how to rap. And at the very end of the episode, she raps his birthday song with it and gives him his cake in a rap. I did all of the key poses for that. So it's pretty much fully animated it, because again, all of the animation for shows like King of the Hill is done overseas, mostly in Korean studios. And so I think that is that culturally specific. It's better to give them as much reference and guidance as possible. And, you know, it was the season premiere episode, and the writers were very, very specific about the sequence. They wanted it to be authentic. And I just had a blast. You know, it was rare that I got to do something like that on that show.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing hip hop Peggy Hill.
All right. Well, see, now I learned something today. That's pretty cool. Tell me about words, Eric. What's your favorite quote, saying, metaphor, or book?
Gosh, I saw a great documentary last night, which was really inspiring. It's called Mr. Soul. And there were so many great quotes in there. I was trying to think of one of them. It's not exactly this, but something like there's no replacement for soul. It's not exactly it, but that's kind of the feeling of it. currently, there's actually 4 books that I'm studying, and they're all basically around business. One is The Lean Startup by Gary Vaynerchuk. Measure What Matters, which is all about OKRs or objective key results.
Okay.
And Business Model Generation, which introduces the concept of business model canvas.
Say that again. It introduces what concept?
The business model canvas. So the business model canvas is basically the old kind of paradigm of writing a business plan.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with business plans is they're very dense. They mostly times don't get read or used. And the business model canvas is basically a new way to look at your business or any business on one page. It basically breaks your business down into these different kind of sections, or it's almost like a game, sure. But it breaks it down into these different things, and it's meant to be put on a huge piece of paper and that you can pin up on a wall and kind of use Post-it notes to kind of move things around and be very interactive with it. It's just a really cool way to kind of visualize your business and to make iterations on the fly.
I think that is going to be my next book.
Yeah, definitely. And they also have the same creators of that book wrote a book called Business Model U, which takes the same technology that they invented in business model generation and applies it to you as a business. So it gives you all these great exercises on how to think about, you mentioned earlier that I've been blessed enough to do work that I'm passionate about, and that, it's just in alignment with myself. That's one of the tools that to just help me crystallize it. I've been really, again, blessed and fortunate that I've always known what I wanted to do. And my wife is a nurse practitioner, and, often kind of joked about, she has kind of like a very serious job, and that the types of nursing jobs she gets are also very serious. But I've often joked I get to, especially when I worked at the Art Institute, my job was to watch cartoons and play games all day. So it kind of balances out, right?
I think there are people who will go, living the dream, living the dream. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing those books. I do want to circle back to the quote, though.
Sure.
I know you said it wasn't exactly, may not be the exact wording, but what was it again?
There's no substitution for soul.
Yeah. What stands out about that for you?
It's just, I just feel like it's so deep, especially in the context of the documentary. Like, this amazing gentleman created this show called Soul, which I didn't know about until this documentary. It was a show that was on public television from the late 60s to the early 70s. And it was like a variety show, but it was really like high Black art. Like they had, not just R&B singers, but gospel. Nikki Giovanni made several appearances. The Last Poets. The show started in 1968 and ended in 1973.
Okay, cool. My next question: what is a moment, person, conversation, or event that stands out as either changing the trajectory of your life or has a special significance in your life?
So that one was right before I moved out to California. I had this kind of trippy experience where I was in a train station. It was in the evening. I don't know how late it was, but there was nobody else around. And there was a homeless woman that was there. And she kind of seemed like, how I recall it anyway, she seemed to kind of appear out of nowhere. She started talking to me and she started telling me that I needed to move out to California and that whatever I was doing here in Philadelphia, I could do out there and that I just needed to go. And yeah, that was, it was trippy.
I got the whole world of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And you listened, you understood it was the universe talking to you.
Yeah, I was definitely contemplating it, but it was, it was a big move. It was a big transition. I'd never done anything like that before. And it was I mean, I feel like it helped, somehow having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I always remember it. Yeah,
Yeah.
like somehow it kind of helped, I guess, ease my anxiety about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's good when you can have something you can point to as a sign.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
What is a moment or event that highlights or puts a spotlight on your experience as a Black man in the United States?
Hmm. This is the toughest one. I guess the one that comes to mind is when I was working on King of the Hill. Again, I was one of the very few Black people that worked on the show. And I had a roommate who also worked on the show who was white. And actually he used to be a student of mine. And I remember having a conversation with him where he basically said to me, you work just as hard as I do. You're more responsible. You got the skill. How come they're not thinking about you as a director and they're thinking about me as a director?
Hmm.
And I just, kind of turned my hand over and pointed to the color of my skin. And he was just shocked. He was just like, no, I can't believe that. I can't believe that that's what it is, And, that was still pretty early in my career, but I definitely have, as fortunate as I've been and as successful as I've been, it's definitely been a challenge for me to, feel like everything has been exactly even. And again, I feel very fortunate to do what I do and again to be as successful as I have been. And yet I, look around again being in, in the industry for, 30 years and seeing what I've seen, it's hard for me to not think that if, I wasn't a Black man, that I would be somehow farther along or have even more opportunity.
Right. Okay. Um, that leads us into, have you had any interactions with law enforcement? Either one or two that you want to share or just a, general statement.
Yeah, no, I did have an experience in Santa Monica years ago. So I had an SUV at the time, and somehow the alarm, which was connected to the steering wheel,
Mm-hmm.
broke, and that it would just intermittently go off. The alarm would go off in the car, and it got to the point where it got really bad, and I made an appointment to get it fixed. Actually, the very next day, it was the weekend. It was a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
It was going off, and it was I would go every week to watch the Eagles play at the sports bar, and so I went, and at halftime we would go and throw the football around in the back of the bar in the alleyway, and I heard the alarm going off. I was like, oh man, and I went and I hit the steering wheel or whatever to get it to go off. And there was a meter maid that was at the car writing me a ticket. And I was like, oh, please don't give me a ticket. I know it's broken. There's nothing I could do about it. No matter where I park it, it's going to go off. have to keep watching it. Please don't give me a ticket. I'm going to take it to the shop tomorrow. And so the woman didn't give me a ticket. And I started walking back towards the alley. And then I started to hear sirens. And then I saw this cop car, like, just swerve around the corner at a really high speed. And I was like, oh man, they're really going after somebody. And then I realized they were coming for me. And they like screeched to a halt, like, just feet in front of me, like when I got to the mouth of the alleyway. And they jumped out, 2 white police officers with their shotguns pointed at me, and started yelling commands at me. And I immediately put my hands up. And then I noticed that my friends, who were mostly white, were in the alleyway, and they were shouting and screaming like, leave him alone, he didn't do anything, that's his car, what are you doing? And like, I'm like psychically willing them to like shut up. Like, I'm like, don't get me killed here, right? Like, just chill out. Next thing you know, I was like slammed down onto the ground. They were being put in the bracelets and being shoved in the back of the car.
Whoa.
Yeah, they basically started checking everything out, got my license and everything, pretty quickly realized that it was my car. That nothing was going on. And then I had, I guess a supervisor came over to me. And again, there was no apology. Like, nobody ever said they were sorry or anything, but basically said, look, what happened was we got a call that there was a stolen vehicle. It's Grand Theft Auto. The policy is to do a hard takedown in a case like that. And that's basically what happened here. And here's my business card. And that was it. And I was really, quite, of course, upset afterwards. But being a Black man, I always have that, whenever I hear a siren or see a cop car behind me, have a very heightened fear and concern that something bad could happen. And a report, it'll just be that I was resisting or something like that. And really, literally anything can happen to me.
Yeah.
And that definitely went up for a couple years probably after that, before I started to calm back down. I do want to say that I feel like in the city of Santa Monica, there must have been some sensitivity training or something, because even before the recent events, I did have a few experiences with officers within the last couple of years where they were super, super polite to me, like calling me sir and smiling and just really like, I feel like extra, like going the extra mile to make me feel at ease.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see what's happened, but it's sad to say that most Black men, no matter even somebody of my kind of profession, likely has one of these stories, at least one.
Yeah.
So
I watched vice president debate, and the issue of racial justice came up, and I listened to Pence say something about, how horrible the situation with George Floyd was, this and that. And then he said, that basically this whole notion that there is implicit bias in policing is, BS. And he even made a comment, and I'm pretty sure he used the word structural racism, as if that was not, Anyway, it was so great that he did that, because it finally got me off my butt to do a press release and include. And so when I was doing it, because I wanted to use some quotes from some of the brothers, and so I went back and listened to different episodes so I could put in things they said. And it's really just, I guess I'm having a kind of a one of these weird moments. It's like, I know that this is why I'm doing the podcast, and at the same time, I still find myself shocked. It's like it's weird to still be shocked, and yet there it is.
Right, another one.
Exactly. So anyway, thank you for taking the time to share that. And I also appreciate that you added, I really do appreciate that you added, what your experience of a change in their training has done, because that's one of the things that I'm clear would make a huge difference, is
I know how they're trained, and they're trained to see enemies versus what's possible if they're trained a different way. And you're
Hmm.
adding that in, just, is something I look forward to having people hear.
Great. Awesome.
So here is where I ask you,
Hmm.
if the United States was a woman, whether lover, friend, neighbor, stranger, whatever, if the United States was a woman, what would you say to her?
Hmm. Um, get help. Deal with the stuff in the past that's holding you back. Get therapy. you know, um, yeah, you could be so much greater if you, um, yeah, just made that investment in dealing with, the past that is, the stuff that you haven't dealt with is obviously impacting you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I think um, 2020 could be, may not necessarily, but it could be a year in which some therapy starts. What is love to you?
Love to me is it's acceptance, is what I like to believe. Like, again, love is accepting yourself or circumstances or other people exactly as they are, exactly as they aren't. But it's also, I think whatever you're passionate about, whatever you really care about deeply.
Got it. What is something you've learned through your profession, training, experiences, or adventures that you believe more Black men should know? I assume people extrapolate it and know that it's for everyone. There are not a lot of opportunities where Black men just talk to Black men that they, don't know. And so this is that opportunity to share something in that context.
I guess one thing is that your history didn't start with slavery, um, and that there's an animation project that I've been developing for several years now that is based in medieval Africa, and that really opened my eyes to that time period, which really, it's not that, like, if you do a quick Google search on medieval Africa, there's actually quite a bit of information out there, but it's just not something that's just in the general consciousness of not just Black people, but really anyone. So I think that is important. And then it's like, I want to say that you really could do anything. And I really want to believe that for everybody. But I know that the reality of that is particularly if you're a Black man in America is more challenging than not. But it is possible. I mean, again, you can always find exceptions. It just
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so yeah.
It's just so perfect for you to say that, um, given that you have been able to create a life you love. It's, I've had the privilege of interviewing, several Black men who have been able to work in a profession that lights them up. And I also hear, you didn't say it directly, or maybe you kind of did, but, like, and don't get discouraged if it takes a little time to get there. Like, just
Sure.
keep going. You can do anything, you can be anything, and know that, there's a pretty high probability of having the experience of discouragement at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And again, and I think that's for anyone. And again, I just feel like there's particular challenges when you're a Black male, just in terms of perception. I was just talking to a good friend of mine yesterday, just in terms of investment. There's a brother I know who started a business, technology business. It's actually virtual reality based. It combines virtual reality and mindfulness. It's kind of like a place where you go to like a virtual world and meditate.
Yeah.
Really brilliant brother. He used to work for Disney. I mean, just incredible guy. Nobody, I talked to him, in our last conversation about like how, it's really important to put yourself out there and let people know, who you are and what you can do and what you have done. But I just really was feeling his frustration. Like I was thinking that he's, the challenge in growing his business was due to COVID, and that people aren't doing, location-based kind of entertainment, going to the movies, going to get massages, stuff like that. But he said, no, I actually have been booked solid. That's not it. The reason why I'm having trouble is because I can't get investment capital. And that, just the reality, if you just look statistically at the numbers, if you're a white male, the chances of you getting real investment capital, I mean, like millions of dollars, just off an idea with no track record at all. You go because of your, basically your environment, your network. If you're a white male, it's just a lot more likely that you are.
It's almost
social
like
social
social capital.
Social capital, yes, that's the word I was looking for. Social capital.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just way more likely that you know somebody that knows somebody, or you have a connection to millions of dollars, and that you can get. And I've seen it firsthand myself. Whereas if you're Black and you're, even if you're really, really talented, even if you have the track record, the chances of you getting, again, you might get some money, oftentimes just enough money to get you into trouble, if you're in the world of startups, right? Especially in technology. But yeah, to get the millions of dollars, it's rare to see it, even with Black VCs out there. So yeah, that is, it's one of those things that, I want to, it's right there for me to say it's disheartening, but in another world, it is what it is. And this is just one of the challenges that we have to face. There are Black founders that go on to have multi-million-dollar businesses. So it is possible for us. And in certain ways through technology, it's even more possible.
Right.
It's just not fair. It's just not balanced.
Yeah, I get that. I know your context is in terms of venture capital and business, but the whole time you were talking, I couldn't help but think about this episode. I think it's an NPR show. I think it's Reveal or something, and they were looking at mortgages. And there was basically, it was a Black woman, and she had a great job, and she had, what she needed, and she was turned down. And then there was a woman, a friend applied. The friend was white and made less money and something else. It was like, and yet she did in fact get the loan. And it was just, and it's not news for most people. I've been reading some studies, and the average American of any race knows that there is bias and discrepancies in how resources are allocated. But the impact of that and what doesn't happen. It's, one of the things that I hear in this conversation is that this mindfulness, in my opinion, you can't have too much mindfulness. And so the people that would be reached and who would benefit from it, if his business doesn't get the full reach that it could, and doesn't get to make the difference that it could, it's a missing for all of us and for the United States as a whole, which is why we said, America needs therapy. It's like, you're not living your best life. You're not living your best life, America.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. And again, all these there's so much conversation, especially in the tech space, about diversity and adding diversity to teams. It definitely there, with George Floyd and all of the recent events, there definitely seemed to be a spark, and like it seemed like a bigger possibility for change.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope that it does happen, that big corporations do actually commit and actually do write the checks and actually do make the investments in Black founders and Black creators and inventors.
Yeah. By the way, if you own a business and you would like to support this podcast, okay. And so we'll finish with this. Now that you've participated in this conversation, what are you present to? What's new, or what do you see, or what are you taking from having this conversation?
Well, I'm present to community, and that's, again, I'm one Black man of many. And in some ways, I'm sure it's very different than many, but also very much the same. Like, I'm sure there's a consistent theme across all of these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's a lot of what I was feeling watching this documentary last night about this incredible Black man who did this amazing thing that a lot of people just don't know about. I guess all of the Black kind of genius and talent that doesn't get noticed and doesn't get supported. And so it's kind of bittersweet, right? Like the resiliency and the genius that we are as a people is inspiring.
Yeah.
And the fact that oftentimes we don't get the notice or accolades or support is disappointing. And again, particularly being in this country and in this system. And I'm definitely hopeful that we're on the verge of some type of change. It seems like change is inevitable. This has been going on for a long time. I feel like we have made progress. We're not still in slavery times, obviously. And so I am hopeful that there's a dynamic and significant change on the horizon.
It is an evolving society. It is an evolving nation. And, like you said, there was the Civil War, and that took something, and it cost lives. And then we had the Civil Rights Movement. There were people who suffered and were jailed, and people who died. And, fortunately, the numbers that have to give their life towards this evolution seems to lessen over time. Yeah, I stand with you that may this be yet another turning point in significant growth.
Yeah, agreed.
Anything else before we conclude?
No, just thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the contribution that you are and that you're being, and in taking this on. This is not something that you have to do, of course, and something that I feel like really can make a difference for people. So I acknowledge you for it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to 365 Brothers. I certainly hope you enjoyed the episode. I encourage you to subscribe. Please leave a review. I want to know what you think. Also, if you know someone who would be a fantastic guest for 365 Brothers, please direct them to our website, 365brothers.com. You'll also find all the episodes there, 365brothers.com. And your support is welcome. And remember, to listen is to love.